Welcome. If you're on here, I need to let me know if you can hear me. If you can, let me know if you're able to hear me. Can you hear me? Good. Yes, I seen a heart. Thank goodness. Let me tell you, as you see, I don't have the mic in front of me at all. And I'm going to take the heart means that you can actually hear me. But the Rode Procaster, this very, very expensive piece of equipment, decided that it did not want to turn on today at all. Have an amazing guest I cannot wait to bring on, but so many things have been trying to come up to attack this conversation. So many different things. I was calming it. I'm going to let it flow because I know what is divinely orchestrated is divinely orchestrated. And as I relaxed in the moment of different possibilities, another thing came up and another thing came up. And then right before getting ready to go on, the Rode Procaster 2, yes, Rode, I'll be getting in contact with you, decided it wasn't coming on at all. And this is fairly new, less than a year, working perfectly fine, but it wasn't coming on. And that's life, right? So much happened. Some things happened, as those of you who attended last week know, and you continue to roll with it. And my constant encouragement has always been to just adapt, go. I mean, that is life. And then here it is another week. And it's like, okay, keep trying to test. But the one thing about me, all of my tests will always become my testimony. All of the mess will always become my messages. Because the one thing that I know for sure, the most influential people aren't the ones who never hit a wall or ones who never have anything happen to them. They are the ones who know how to pivot without losing power, because we are the power. We are it. And no matter what, we show up in that. Because pivoting doesn't mean that you're off track. And yes, pun intended, from an athlete, a track athlete. It means that you're constantly adjusting for something greater. So every time things happen, I actually learn from the experience, but I also have gratitude in it because I know there's something greater. And tonight we're talking about brand, right? And so much more, because brand is bigger than logos or visuals. You hear that always when we talk about brand, when we talk about it in social media or with marketing, it's always just about these logos and visuals. But that brand is showing up in your power and it being reflected in everything that comes from you. We're going to talk about business and influence, but we're going to talk about the reality of impact. You see how all of it just keeps coming together? So, I mean, your brand is not just built on everything going right. It is not. It is actually built in the moments when you have to make decisions in real time, shift the energy, and still show up aligned with who you are, whose you are, and what you are called to do. That's real work. And that's what I committed myself to, real work. And I've always asked to be an example of the things I talk about, that I teach. So I'm not just preaching, but I'm living it. So be ready to receive the things you ask for. But this is how you build not just a brand, but a brand that lives beyond any type of platforms that we're using, that we're given, that we're blessed to have. It lives beyond that. So if you are in this room tonight, if you are watching this live, you're meant to be here. You're definitely meant to be here for a reason. Because it's bigger than just you coming here to hear how to build something external. You're here because you need to build something internal. So I just had to get that out because I don't know. I felt I had to get it out. with all things happening. That was the seed I was supposed to plant. Now, welcome to the Seek Elevation Experience with yours truly, Attorney Elakeisha. Yes, I am an attorney, but I may not be yours. So if I do mention anything that deals with legal, I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm giving you legal education and legal gems for you to use and dig more with that and become better with that. But right here is where we talk about real issues with real people, have real conversations, and all of that takes center stage. Sometimes I bring on a guest, sometimes it's just me and you. And today was one of those days where it's about a guest, but I had to take a moment where it was me and you, because change doesn't happen in silence. And we have conversations from sports and entertainment to business and community, and we elevate the voices that need to be heard. Not just the voices of those who come on here, but those of you who may have questions, those of you who may want to engage in the dialogue. Because we don't just talk here, we empower, we inspire, and we definitely challenge the status quo. So, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce who my guest is, since we already took more time in the introduction. And today we're talking about beyond the brand, right? We're talking about the business of influence and impact and whatever that may look like. So have your mind with a clear slate and don't try to determine what that conversation will look like or where it will go, especially how it already set off. We just don't know. So just come in with a clear slate as we talk about business and talk about impact. But my guest, Mr. Robert Ennis, is a brand builder who thrives at the intersection of insight, innovation, and impact. With a passion for turning data into strategy and strategy into growth, he has helped multi-million-dollar brands translate consumer behavior into bold commercial moves that deliver measurable results. After earning his MBA from the University of Pittsburgh, he sharpened his analytical and leadership skills by driving brand health strategies and executing commercial plans that sparked double-digit growth. While at Kraft Heinz, he led initiatives that generated $15 million in incremental value in just 1 year. In just 1 year. But his marketing journey didn't begin in the boardroom. He started on the track. Before business school, he led the retail merchandising team at USA Track and Field, launching athlete-driven campaigns and managing Olympic-level activation. And so you already know there is a special place in my heart as a USA Track and Field athlete, as an athlete, period. Athlete in life, but of course, athlete on the track. One of his proudest moments was delivering a powerful retail experience at the 2014 World Junior Championships that drove 20% annual revenue in just 2.5 weeks. At his core, he believes great brands don't just speak to consumers. Hear, 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 hear. They connect with people, whether through storytelling, innovation, or strategy. He is committed to building brands that matter. And outside of the office, he can be found hitting the pavement with his new run crew, championing communities of color, and uplifting small businesses through culture, connection, and consistency. So, whether he's crafting campaigns for global firms or capturing the essence of brands individually, he is a resemblance of that. With no further ado, we are going to go ahead and bring Robert to the stage.
Thank you, Elakeisha. I really appreciate it, and I love the intro that you created for me. So thank you for that.
Listen, I just delivered the intro. You created it as the creator because you lived it.
Yeah,
your life creates it, and you gave me something to share. So I thank you for what you do.
Awesome.
How are you today? And first of all, before we even start, let me say thank you. As I started the introduction, just in general of this segment, I just talked about some of the things that I was dealing with and how that's life. But I want to thank you because you were handling a lot of things, making sure you get out and handle business, taking care of things. And we didn't know what time you were going to be able to make it, but you was hoping to be, and you took care of business and still made it here. So first of all, we're going to be very appreciative of Robert Time making it definitely happen. But that is called life too, lifing. So I appreciate you. Thank you from the top of my heart.
No problem. No problem at all. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get into it. But before we do, I do the intro for my guests that come on here from what I feel inside. But I also like to start off before we get into any questions and dialogue. I want to give the guests the platform just to talk a little bit from their perspective about themselves and what they want individuals that are viewing now or hear it or watch it on the replay. So if you can just share from your words, who is Robert?
Yes. First off, I'm a son. I'm a first generation American as well. My mom's born and raised in Guyana. Raised me in Orange, New Jersey. Grew up between Orange, East Orange, and Newark. Now I'm a husband and soon-to-be father. As you could see, the diapers in my background. And this office that I have is eventually going to be my son's room. So I'm excited for that. Outside of that, and with that, at least, I'm a marathon runner. I've done 3 marathons. Did Boston Marathon this year. Worked at USA Track and Field, like you mentioned, and currently on the board of directors for USA Track and Field New England, and also still do brand strategy work on the side right now. Trying to eventually build that into a full-time role, but at the moment, have a couple clients where I help them with brand strategy, go-to-market projects as well. But excited to be here and excited to talk to you, and I'm just happy to sort of tell my story. So.
And I want you to use this platform to tell it. So there may be some questions I have, but I also want to go with the flow, and I want you to be able to share what it is in you to share, because that's what this is for. That platform is for, and we never want to cut that down. But before we start, that marathon, you did a color marathon. So on my bucket list, I want to do a marathon. That is on my bucket list. I already started with the half marathon. I did a couple of years ago. I tried to find one that I thought was going to be easy. I don't know how you even.
There's no easy marathon.
I just figured
no easy marathon. My first one was flat, and it hurt. It hurt the worst out of all of the other 2 marathons that I've had. So it's
But you know the funny thing about that, where I thought I was going to do something flat, when you exhausted, what you thought was flat, you would end up finding that, oh shoot, there's a little hill right here. So I did one in Georgia. Yeah. And in the area that we were at, I thought, oh, this is going to be. But as I was running, I started realizing in areas down there that there were hills that did not look like hills. By the time I finished, and then I learned you have to wear the right socks, not just the shoes. So I made sure I purchased the right shoes, all that. But I had the socks with the line on it. And I don't know how far I was, what mile I was at, but that line started pressing in between that pinky toe.
Yeah.
And I had to still keep finishing. And I thought when I finished, I just knew for sure. I said, when I finish, I think my pinky toe is severed. I don't think it's still. The pain was excruciating. So I think that detracted from the pain of the body. It was just something. It was an experience. But when I finished, feet was intact. Everything was good. And the emotion, which I wasn't expecting, the flooding of the emotion for accomplishing something like that just immediately took over. And I just was loving everybody around me. I love you. I love you. And it was so emotional. So now it is on my bucket list to do the marathon. I'm given so many suggestions where I should probably do my first one. So I don't know what I want to do. Someone told me, do the Disney one. Just make it where
fun.
It's not so serious.
I mean, I would advise you do one in the city. I mean, my first one was on the outskirts of Boston. I live in Boston now, but on the outskirts of Boston. It was still like a smaller city in Massachusetts, but there were pockets of the race that didn't have people. Whereas when I did Boston Marathon, from start to finish, there was people. And for me, that when it got hard, it was still a lot of energy, and I really enjoyed that. So definitely do one that has, if you could get into one that has a lot of people. So.
See, I agree with that then. Yeah, I agree. I need people along the way. I don't need a pocket where it's going to be like a dead spot. I need that cheering on. Question, are you allowed to listen? Do you have to put like all devices away, or can you listen to music? Like can you have
Yeah.
earphones in it?
Yeah, you can have earphones. Like I made my playlist for all the marathons that I've had that I ran. So playlists I made worked perfectly for me. There was some parts of it where I like saw people, like I saw my wife at mile 22, so I stopped and dapped her up and kissed her and whatnot. So that was like key for me, is having my music, but also if there's people that I know, I stop my music and say hi to them. So,
well, thank you for the 2 tips, because I will make my playlist. I will have Michael Jackson on it most of the time, but I will make my playlist, and yeah, that's going to help me definitely get through. And I have to also learn that this is your bucket list, Keisha. You don't have to go out there and be competitive in everything you do. And that's the problem too. Going out there thinking you can just have your purpose and stay in your zone of purpose when you do it. So those are some of the things I'm gonna think about.
mm-hmm.
So I'll let you know. All right. So let's start off with just your journey in general. Like you said, you help so many of these companies. You're now segueing into helping individuals when it comes to branding. What is your definition when you think about branding, but what sparked your interest in this space altogether? Like, was there something in your path that sparked it, or something that kind of shaped you moving in this type of career path?
Yeah, so for me, it all started with just having a level of curiosity, and I don't know where some of your viewers are from, but like I said, I grew up in Orange, New Jersey, moved to West Orange, and we didn't really have exposure to any things like this. People in our world who were professional were like doctors, and that was it. Like my doctor. Outside of that, when you grow up in inner city, you don't really have much exposure to people who work and operate in business, or at least I didn't. Luckily, we had a lot of exposure to different things, particularly from a brand standpoint. Like we knew what, Nike was, we knew what Tommy Hilfiger was back in the 90s. These were the brands that were big, right? Coogee, Jabot, all these were brands. We didn't think about them as brands, but I knew that I saw them on people's bodies and I felt a certain way. And when the internet came, I started researching who these companies were. And that sort of catapulted my level of curiosity and just understanding and picking into who brands were. And I went to college purely because I was told to. And luckily I ran track, had a partial scholarship as well. And my grades weren't the best, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Ended up deciding to major in sports management because I knew some people that actually interned at USA Track and Field. And my goal was eventually to work in sports. So with that said, one of the classes that we had to take was a sports marketing class. And for me, I loved it because it gave me the opportunity to sort of work on a project with some of my classmates, essentially come up with a fictional idea and essentially create a marketing strategy behind it. And we ended up doing something around Madden and high school football. So my teammates and I, we didn't even know what building a brand was, but we had to build a brand from scratch. And then from there, we had to develop a fictional go-to-market strategy. And that was a lot of fun. And for me, I ended up continuously going down the rabbit holes of marketing. And while I didn't land in a marketing role directly out of college, I worked at a gym nearby in New Jersey and was able to network with people who actually worked in the marketing and branding space. And for me, my eyes opened wide to see what the opportunities were. And to be honest, those opportunities I wasn't even exposed to in college because I went to school in Pennsylvania. But I grew up outside of New York. So New York was a hotbed of media and marketing. And I was able to sort of connect with people who were doing things in that space. And that gave me the wherewithal and understanding of what my next step should be, eventually actually landing me at USA Track and Field. While there, I started learning a little bit more about marketing and brands that existed in running as well as the bigger spaces within CPG, and had no clue how to venture into those spaces. Eventually made some networks, made some connections while at USATF, while externally as well, particularly within the CPG space, and knew that I had to leave and get my MBA. And while there, I knew and learned about building brands from a CPG standpoint. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Procter & Gamble, these are all sort of the blue chip brands that a lot of people who make it to the peak of their careers in marketing end up having to start at. And for me, I knew that's where I needed to be eventually, which is why I ended up landing at Kraft Heinz and Nestle. And my goal at the end of the day at these companies were to really learn the fundamentals around marketing. And what I really learned was sort of how to be a general manager rooted marketer, which, you know, which means understanding profit and loss statement, understanding forecasts, understanding all the different factors that in fact affect and impact your brand. And you can have a great brand strategy, but if your product isn't great, if your product isn't profitable, if you don't have the right sales channel and if those sales channels aren't activated properly, then your brand is going to fall flat. So for me, those were things that I learned that I think helped ground me in understanding my learning of how I understand marketing. And even outside of CPG, there's still brands that do that well. Any of your running apparel brands do that fairly well, whether it be your Nikes, your Pumas, your Under Armours of the world, or some smaller startups as well, like Bandit or Janji. These are all smaller running brands that do fairly well, that have a good control of the channels of distribution, and marketing sort of touches all the different touch points, and all the different touch points of the marketing funnel sort of have to have your brand ethos in terms of how you want your product to be consumed by consumers and how you want your product to be sort of resonate within their mind. So for me, sort of from start to finish, the level of curiosity I've had from understanding how people buy products sort of, existed all the way when I was 16, watching people wear Jabot jeans downtown Newark, all the way to, me looking at how brands resonate with runners, which is, something that I obsess about right now.
So the one thing I heard you echo a few times, especially in your journey, was network, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was one, when you didn't have that example to figure out, it came from starting, stepping in, and then networking. And then when you didn't even see how the role was possible, it was networking. So we're going to talk more about that, but I want to go back. When you saw the brands that you named, and you knew, even when you didn't know it was mean brand, what did you feel? Was it telling you a story? Like when you seen these Nikes and Fubu and all that, what did that mean to you when you were seeing these different brands?
I mean, at the end of the day, it was the ethos that they all sort of portrayed. I mean, at the end of the day, as a young man, you see Kuji, you see Fubu, and all the rappers wearing Kuji and Fubu gets all the girls. At 16, that's what I wanted. So for me, that resonated with me initially. But looking at it as a married man now with a kid, I don't want any more girls. I have my wife. But I still look back at those brands, and they did a good job of sort of telling the story and reaching our community in a specific way. Each rap group or whatever sort of wore their clothes in a specific way and was very creative. And Kuji, Timberland, Jabot, Fubu allowed people to tell their story and allowed people to sort of signal who they thought they were, right? While I didn't have a Kuji sweater, I had something that was Fubu. I had a pair of Tims growing up. And for me, that communicated that I was part of a group of people who thought they were cool. And whether I got girls with it or not, for me, I still resonated with that group. And people, everybody feels good when somebody says, yo, your outfit looks dope, right? Having a jersey, having a fitted cap, having a pair of baggy jeans, some Tims in the 90s and 2000s were cool. And for me, that was it, right? What I did after the fact, was a different story. But, for me, that allowed me to tell the story, and that allowed me to sort of communicate that I was part of a group of people that sort of saw the world a certain way. Fast forward to today, brands still sort of borrow from similar architecture of, making sure that people feel part of a community. And brands do a good job of sort of even creating that community and sort of, creating a community, which is sort of a component to what they do. Back in the 90s, community marketing wasn't really a thing. And I think Nike actually did a pretty good job of sort of tapping into that if you're familiar with like how Nike sort of builds up their marketers, but they have this role called Econ, where basically is like people that are on the ground, understanding the culture and leveraging that culture to sort of create strategies to sort of reach their consumer. And I want to say back in the 90s, you had Econs in New York who basically used to play basketball at Rucker Park. People pivoted to roles at Nike to where they understood what the culture was in New York, sort of the culture that created sort of basketball culture in the US. And they were able to leverage those insights to sort of create marketing strategies for Nike. And there's people who started at Econs who ended up becoming directors and VPs at Nike to this day. So there's a lot of understanding of cultural nuance that I think brands sometimes miss, that I think are incredibly important when it comes to launching brands. And some companies get it right. Some companies don't even need it, to be honest. If you're selling, Huggies and Pampers, there definitely is a community of mothers, but I could very well get an MBA from X business school, USA, and not have kids and build brand strategies for Huggies or Pampers and do really well for that brand. But other brands like Nike, they, it's not going to be as easy to get those kind of jobs, to be honest. So.
And that's exactly why I asked you that question, and you repeated it several times, which is great. I asked you that question: what did you feel, or what did it mean to you when you know it was a brand story? There was a storytelling. It's something that attaches, and this is why I tell individuals too when I talk about clients, right? I don't usually refer to it as target market. I try to remember the book I read. I cannot think of it off the top of my head, but it categorized them as your congregation. You want people following you off this message that you're actually preaching, and they're connecting to whatever that message is, and that brand signifies that. So like you said, it was storytelling, and you connected to so many stories from the different brands, whether it was Tim's, Nike, and whatever that meant. That's why I ask you that question. Now, going to networking, how did you navigate networking? I know, some people will feel like, introverts or whatever, or extroverts versus what. How did you navigate connecting to that person and that next person that, opened or guided you to the next opportunity? What did that look like?
I mean, it was crazy that I'm an introvert, but back in the 2000s, I was very extroverted when it came to like my career. So I remember going to being that I lived in New Jersey, going to New York was just a hop, skip, and a jump away. So I can remember finding networking opportunities and just going and connecting with people and, getting their information and then scheduling times to go visit them in their office. That happened a couple of different times. And I would say this was during the recession. So just about none of them landed to jobs, but a couple of them did lead to like unpaid internships, which at the time I wasn't risky enough to sort of take that risk. In retrospect, I should have done it, but that's, hindsight's 2020. But with that said, it did give me an ability to sort of connect with people and learn a lot from people who were already doing it within their careers. And for me, those mentors that I ended up sort of tapping into informed a lot of what I did when I was at USATF. USATF at the end of the day was a nonprofit, so it wasn't nearly as big as the Nikes or the Under Armours of the world. But I was able to sort of talk to the mentors that I made and figure out ways that I could sort of improve what I was doing at USATF, whether it be ways to sort of lead and drive a social media strategy, or how do I coordinate a photo shoot with Olympians while I have their perspective. How do I sort of engage them a bit more and create social strategies around them? And I was able to sort of borrow a lot of the insights that I got from my mentors to sort of drive some of the strategies that I had when I was, at USATF. And, when I ended up going to business school, it's definitely my fault, but I sort of let some of the mentors that I had sort of go by the wayside to some extent. And some of the contacts that I did have, I should have done a better job of sort of keeping in touch with them. And it's still not too late, but as life got busier for me, it got harder to sort of keep in touch with some of the mentors that I had. But, still not too late at the end of the day.
It's not. And also there's seasons, right? There's always seasons and reasons and seasons and however you're supposed to move. But you said something, a keyword that just triggered. Okay, you said strategy, and I applied this strategy. And you mentioned earlier how understanding strategy, especially if you're behind a brand, would take certain things. You said Huggies, maybe an MBA, and you can apply this, but if you go here, it's something else. So after getting your MBA, after learning these analytical skills, what have you applied from your MBA to actually strategizing for brands, and what did you apply that had nothing to do with your MBA, but maybe lived or learned experiences?
So I think what I learned within my MBA is when approaching clients, I can like see a company that's doing well or is doing poorly from a mile away. And for me, that muscle is sort of hard to turn off. Like the ability to like understand your operational procedures, profit and loss statements. And then if I can come to a company and say, hey, you want to build a brand. All right, cool. Well, what are you trying to sell? What's your 1 to 2 year plan look like? If there's a lot of these fundamentals that they don't have from a business standpoint, then there's only so much that I could do from a brand standpoint. And I could very well give you my services right now. But if your businesses exist in 2 years, then the relationship that we have isn't going to be sustainable. So for me, trying to take on more clients, I want something that's long-term. If I don't think your business is going to be long-term, it's going to be very difficult for me to take you seriously as a client. Another thing that I would say, I think that I sort of add into that the MBA didn't really sort of teach me was, well, to some extent teach me. Building brand strategy often does come with consumer insights and cultural insights and business insights. And, those three things merge together to sort of create a brand strategy. And I would think the cultural insights, brands definitely lean heavily on agencies to sort of understand that.
Yeah.
But me being part of the culture to some extent, or understanding culture, depending on what kind of culture it's tapping into, I know when somebody is taking advantage of a culture rather than actually influencing culture and sort of giving back to it. And you could see that from a mile away. And having, bless my past coworkers at past companies out there, but I very well bet that, if they were to, get a job at X brand and sort of try to tap into, run club movement or tap into, multicultural consumers, that a lot of what they'll do will definitely fall flat. And purely because they just don't understand the nuances that exist within some of the cultures, and vice versa. There's some cultures that I'm not aware of, and I would very well lean heavily into a person who's part of that culture to give me the insight, to sort of drive some of that strategy. Case in point, when I was at Nestle, working on Perrier, I led a couple campaigns around Pride Month, and great campaign I ended up leading, but being not part of the community, I didn't want to sort of show up falsely and in a way that felt inauthentic. So ended up sort of tapping into some of my peers who were part of the community, as well as some of the employee resource groups as well, just to make sure that the campaign that we were launching made sense and made sense to that community specifically. And for me, double checking, dotting the I's and crossing all the T's were incredibly important for me to do that. So.
No, that's huge that you just said that, Robert. This thing you said, you can tell, you can identify for sure, one, a mile away, just if a company's ready. But in having these conversations, certain answers that are given will also trigger if someone's ready to, and when I say ready to even just move to the next level, continue to elevate. So you brought up a couple of very important terms: individual, especially in entrepreneurship, understanding what profit and loss statements are. That is very huge. So if you hear him say P&L, that's profit and loss, really get a grasp and understanding what that is. But another thing you pointed out is going inside sectors just because you think, whatever reasons you think, other than being genuine about it. Because like you said, you can tell when individuals are taking advantage of a culture and using that, which people call culture vultures. I talk about that even now with the NIL space, right? With this name, image, and likeness in the collegiate space. You have a lot of people that just jump into it because it's another chance to make money, but there's no relatability. It's just using a lot. And so I always teach people, go back and understand this space and those that you're serving in the space, right? And how you're speaking to it. So I'm happy that you touched on those two very important things right there. How do you see, when you say, because you keep saying brand marketing, can you sum that up? When you say brand marketing, do you see it as selling? Because I also heard you say storytelling. Do you see storytelling and selling together? Because some people say, I don't like to sell. I'm one of those people, right? I don't. But we're always selling, no matter, we may define it differently, but we're always selling, maybe just different kind of stories. But how do you define brand marketing? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, brand marketing essentially helps create a sort of vision or picture of the brand within a person's minds, and the marketing tactics help execute those different components. So you have to build out a brand strategy, and a brand strategy usually is like, there's segmentation, targeting, and positioning. Understand who your segment is, understand who your target is, understand how you want your product to be positioned towards your consumer. So for me, that's the fundamentals of brand marketing are that. And then marketing execution is what comes from that, right? You have your concept of who you are, and then you have your social media campaign, you have your ad, you have your event marketing campaign as well. Sales is also an incredibly important part of it. Sales is just another touch point with the consumer. But when you think about it, there's a marketing funnel. Sales is sort of the end of the funnel where you want to convert people to sort of make that purchase. In certain companies that don't have e-commerce components, sales is very important. Your job as a marketer is to make the sales team's jobs a whole lot easier. And if you are a one person brand, you are the salesperson and you are the marketing person as well. And you have to understand what your brand story is, and your brand story has to be communicated well to consumers, to investors, to anybody that has some kind of influence on ensuring that your brand is successful.
So if I'm reiterating, get this correctly. So when you say brand, that's more of the visual, the communication of this source providing this, whatever this is. It's a tied to the story.
Mm-hmm.
The marketing is how you execute that communication of that visual or that story that you want out. Is that summarizing it right? Or
yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay. And so where's that gap at when you have this source that you want people to identify and connect to, and the way you execute, but it's not impacting, it's not making an influence? Is it because there's always somebody to connect to some story, right? So where is this disconnect? What is missing if they don't feel that I'm impacting or influencing or just getting traction?
Yeah. It could be a lot of things that are missed. Starting off with your brand, right? If those three things that I mentioned earlier don't land well, like if your consumer insight or your cultural insight, business to some extent isn't as important, but if the consumer insight and cultural insight isn't like accurate or isn't really spot on, you very well could be launching something with the wrong consumer insights or with the wrong cultural insight. Right? How running community exists in Georgia is different from how it exists in New York. And if you try to take the same strategies or the same insights that work in New York in Georgia, you might fall flat, right? Understanding that, all right, people in New York don't have cars. They catch the subway everywhere. So you could launch something that taps into that market that doesn't work in Georgia, and it could fall flat. So if whatever insight that you're tapping into, if it doesn't work, then that could very well be the issue. Another thing going down, the marketing funnel, if you're not able to sort of get the different touch points, on board in bigger companies, for instance, if your cross-functional teams aren't working well and lockstep with you, then your marketing, your brand strategy is not going to work. It's just not going to work. And the sales or whatever goal you have isn't going to necessarily work. There are other things that could be outside of your control that could also impact you. If your whole brand is built off of social media, and all of a sudden Instagram switches up the algorithm, that could make your brand strategy fail. So there's multiple components that I think sort of could hurt your brand strategy. But I think it all boils down to sort of understanding your business and understanding each component of your business and understanding what changes and what shifts happen. If you're disconnected from the different components, then what you call your go-to-market strategy, if that fails, then your marketing, your brand strategy will definitely fail.
So is that the common disconnect when you, speaking of consumer insights, is that the common disconnect you see when it comes to consumer insights, where individuals may be offering a certain product or service and they look at it maybe on a national scale, bigger scale, but they probably need to hone it in? Because you just brought up, you may be looking at something in New York, but it may be totally different in this other state. Like, from your experience, what are some common disconnects when it comes to using consumer insights, and do you help clientele in that area?
Yeah, like I said, making sure that the insight resonates really well with the consumer. There's a wealth of information that exists in this world, and I think brands sometimes use the wrong information. So making sure that the information that you use connects really well with who you're trying to reach and who you're trying to target. I think that matters a lot.
Like, example, like just to try to give them something to hold. Like, so I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example. If you could think of an example, like, when can someone use consumer insight incorrectly? Because how I'm hearing both words, consumer insight. Consumer means someone who is consuming possibly what you offer. The insights on that is just seeing how consumers, their wants, their needs, their dislikes, all that in that thing they're consuming. So how can they, I don't know, how can they view it wrong?
Case in point, right? Diapers behind me. You have Huggies, you have Pampers, right? Unopened. Both brands help, both brands at the end of the day are diapers, and they help, they help collect the the waste from babies, essentially. So if you sort of stop short on just that insight, you could very well create a diaper company that solves that problem alone. But the real issue, you're not solving a problem for the baby, you're solving a problem for the parent, right? If you stop at just solving a problem for the baby, then that's not going to go as far. You're going to create another diaper company that might be comfortable for the child, but doesn't really resonate with the parent. At the end of the day, they're the ones that are buying it. So ensuring that you're helping solve the problem for the parent, there's multiple things, like the diaper could stop blowout, the diaper could be comfortable or uncomfortable for your baby. You as a parent know what your baby needs the most, and your job, Huggies or Pampers' job at the end of the day is to make your job as a parent easier. How they make it easier, that's a different question. But I guarantee you that there's different insights that Huggies and there's different insights that Pampers has when it comes to going to market with the products that they're launching for parents that are buying the product. And like I said, I think Huggies might be a bit more affluent and Pampers might be a bit not as affluent. So how you target those different consumer segments is going to be different. But if you use the insight for Huggies that you do for Pampers, that's not going to work because the person that you're trying to target already has Huggies in mind, and I'm going to buy Huggies and not Pampers, and you're going to waste money trying to reach that consumer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of both, because you're using both, like Pampers had to, one of the things I'm really big on is making sure people understand their intellectual property and, protecting it. Pampers was one of those ones that had to police their intellectual property because it is actually a brand where we became used to calling a diaper, the thing that we use for our baby, everything a pamper. Oh, give me a pamper. And it could literally be Huggies, but we're saying, go get a pamper. Yeah. So they had to police that brand to understand. So that already infiltrated a particular sector because everything was already seen as a pamper. And sometimes they may, unconsciously just grab or subconsciously grab Pampers because they're saying, I'm going to get a pamper, but it is Huggies. But I love how thank you for that example. That makes absolute sense with consumer insight because you're thinking, oh, consumers want this, but you have to pay attention to who is the actual consumer and why are they the consumer? What are their needs? So your insight can fall flat if it doesn't go deeper. Thank you for that example. That absolutely made a lot of sense. So when you talk about health, the brand of a health and continue to grow and look good, because you have some brands that just been staples for eons, some that have come and went and try to move in those same sectors and didn't make it. Then you had some that's been around for a long time, right? So let's talk about used to go to Blockbuster, right? That was there, but then you have some that move in and they're brand new, and then all of a sudden they take you over. That brand health, they want what that is. So what are some things for individuals to think about or that you even discuss with your clientele when it comes to brand health?
Yeah. So for brand health, there's multiple different ways to look at brand health. Bigger companies have what they call a brand health tracker, which they pay companies hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to sort of track how their brand is perceived in the market. There's definitely ways to do that on a cheaper scale, to be honest. But at the end of the day, they look at where the brand fits on the different parts of the marketing funnel of awareness, consideration, trial, purchase, loyalty, and they see where they are on a metric on a scale of 100 on each level, right? That's one aspect. And Huggies and Pampers probably have a brand health tracker that track both brands to see how aware people are of the brand. Both of these brands probably are at 90%, which is really high based off of the U.S. population. And consideration, I think, is probably a little different for both brands. But depending on the maturity of your brand, Huggies and Pampers probably don't really care where they are from an awareness and consideration standpoint. But they really care probably more about the loyalty component because at the end of the day, they want repeat purchases. And I think if you are a smaller brand and don't have access to these big resources that a P&G or Kimberly-Clark has, you can very well track who your repeat purchases are. And if you're not selling a hard good, how many people are coming back to your website consistently for the content that you're creating? How many people are constantly commenting on your social media platforms? And granted, you can have your engagement rates, your views, and all these different things. But if you have the same people coming back to make comments to your page, then that's a good insight that says that people love your brand. And brand love is a key component for smaller brands to sort of understand what their brand health is. And if you're trying to have a local impact, think about how many people in your area who love your brand, who love the content that you're creating. And I think that's a way to sort of track brand health. When it comes to clients locally, that's sort of how I look at it. Like making sure that the people that you're trying to reach are constantly engaged with what you're trying to do. And if you have an email list, you're tracking email opens, you're tracking click-throughs from your email, and you're tracking visits to your website, and you're tracking people who are constantly coming back to your site. So there's definitely sort of a ecosystem or a virtual circle of people who constantly are coming back to your website, to your social media pages. That's sort of a way to sort of track brand health.
Well, you just brought up, like you said, looking at emails, people coming to your website, paying attention, things like that, social media. I talked a few weeks ago to someone, and we talked about just data in general. Mm-hmm. Everything around it is data. Whatever it is, we need to use data because it's telling us a story. So when you're talking about some of the things you just brought up, that is data. Mm-hmm. How do you double down on that information that you actually have? You have these same repeat consumers, as you said, or customers or clients. What if it's the same? Is that speaking to they love your product, or it's you need to do something more to expand more, or just focus on what those individuals are coming back with? Like, how do you double down on the data that you have?
So yeah, if you have the data, I think when it comes to, it's important to run surveys, right? So if you have people that are coming to your website, if you have a extensive email list, if you have a decent social media following, Google surveys are free. So you could very well put together a survey to just understand who the people are that are coming to your site and what they want and what kind of problems that you're helping them solve at the end of the day, and use that form to sort of figure that out and figure out what they want. And that can give you insight to what resonates well with them, what doesn't resonate well with them. And you can use that data to sort of inform your business and marketing strategy. Another thing that you can do is, it's fairly easy. You don't even have to understand the data, but you can sort of run ads against the audience that currently follows your platform. So case in point, my wife and I, we did a 5K in our neighborhood in Boston most recently, and we ran a lot of ads towards people that already followed our page, and that ended up helping us sell out the 5K in record time. So that's just a bit of insight that we ended up leveraging, that I didn't really need to understand the data. I just had to leverage the data that existed on the platform to target consumers that we wanted to target. So that's sort of a bit of how I would leverage data to sort of help build a business. If you have whatever entity it is, if you have the same people that are coming to your website, you can use that for a business strategy as well. And you can sort of create what they call a community marketing program to sort of help the people who are already lovers of your brand become advocates for your brand and brand ambassadors for you. So now you don't have to do any work. You can have them do the work for you. You can have them become content creators for you. You can have them be salespeople for you. And you can now deploy a community of people to sort of help build your brand at the end of the day because they're loyal. So
absolutely. No, that is the next level. Like, I think to your point, we always think about how do we continue to go to the next level for brand health. And one of them in the beginning is about you develop your story, all this good stuff. But the next level is having your advocates do it now, right? So that continues with the brand health. That is huge. But I wanted you to go back, repeat what you, so I'm trying to understand your process. Like you said, you just gave an example where it didn't take all this data or whatever, but you were able to sell out a 5K on your platform because what? Explain.
So I mean, it all started with me building out a brand strategy for the 5K, right? Because I'm the runner and my wife is like the community organizer in the neighborhood that we live in. So to plug it, it's called the Mattapan 5K Unity Fest, right? And if you're not familiar with the neighborhoods in Boston, Mattapan is probably the largest predominantly Black neighborhood in Boston. Huge population of immigrants, high population of Haitian immigrants and Latino immigrants as well. So with that said, we knew that creating a race in this neighborhood was necessary because other neighborhoods do have races, and Dorchester is another, predominantly Black neighborhood, as is Roxbury, and both of those neighborhoods have races as well. But we wanted to create one in Mattapan as well, and given her network within like the civic world and my network within the running community here in Boston, we knew it's something that we could pull off and at minimum get 100 runners, right? But the strategy that I proposed was, number one, I created a strategy of understanding who we wanted to target, which number one was people that existed in Mattapan, and more so to get people in the neighborhood running, because you might be familiar, in urban communities across the U.S., it's like, oh, why should I run? That's not for me. We wanted to ensure that the people who are in our area know that this is something for you, and people who look like you also do this. So that was like our key target. Secondary target were people that exist in the running community already, which I know would already show up. So that was our strategy. And then we wanted to create sort of ethos of what we wanted to tap into. Both of us like soca music, so we knew that it had to be something that was rooted in music, and rooted in the food that exists in our cultures as well. My wife, like I said, my wife is Haitian and I'm Guyanese, so having food and music that sort of mixes both cultures is something that we wanted to communicate and have our followers to sort of experience. So that was sort of the mission statement of what we wanted to create. That manifested itself into visuals, which we wanted it to look like a soca party. So we borrowed stuff that existed from larger soca promoters throughout the world and gave that to a designer, and the designer created our logo, and the designer also created our first flyer, which looked like it was a soca party. So with that said, I was able to sort of create the flyer, and that was sort of our save the date. We created our social channel and we ran an ad around that flyer. And then separately, I was able to sort of use that same vision to create a video production brief, which number one, I had to tap into my network and my wife's network to figure out people that would show up in a video shoot. And I used that insight of, what does running in Mattapan mean to you? What does it mean to sort of, what does your health mean to you? And why is this race important to you? And we used that as fodder for the video. We ended up running ads behind that video. And the ads that I ran were the people that I mentioned earlier. I looked at a couple different things within Instagram, and I ended up targeting people that existed within those spaces. And after I ran that ad, prior to running that ad, we had roughly 30 people registered. A month after running that ad, we had 300 people registered. So, and that's outside of that, we did multiple other things. We were able to get sponsors as well, and a sponsor helped pay for a billboard in our neighborhood. And my wife, give as connected as she is, we had a lot of community partners. Just about all of the run crews that I run with here in Boston were able to sort of support us as well. And they posted on social, posted on their Halo channels, and the community partners that she knows in the music space in the city, as well as civically, we were able to do cross collaboration posts with them as well. So all of it started with an idea, a brand strategy, and these were the different components of execution that we were able to do to sort of drive sort of the 380 people that registered for the race. My wife was in charge of creating the experience, being on the ground. I was in charge of the race experience. She was in charge of the festival experience. And I made sure that the route was what it needed to be. We had water at the right places. We had run crews positioned on the course to cheer people on. And she was responsible for finding the food vendor, finding other vendors as well to help sort of promote health and wellness in our neighborhood. And she knows the DJ, so she was able to sort of bring in DJs and sound to sort of create the experience that we wanted to create. And ended up running a survey after the race, and people loved it. 100% of the people who took the survey said they were going to come back next year, which, I'm excited after this baby comes, at least, to plan for the race next year. So something that her and I came together to do, our worlds. And the race day, we got no sleep the night before, but seeing all the people running and loving the food and the music, made both of our hearts warm. So
thank you for that. First of all, that is going to be like just the highlight, because the example that you just gave, you executed everything that you preach and that you teach, and that you do it for every company. I heard every touch point within there, all the way from conception to delivery, starting with the idea, knowing what your exact story is going to be, knowing what the story has to be based on who you're targeting, right? You got to create it a certain way, and then putting a visual to that. And then connections, collaborations, that's huge. Touch point of individuals that can help you execute in those particular areas, like you talked about earlier, but also collaborating with individuals who can help you in areas maybe that you don't know, inspire you in certain areas, or just deliver based on what you need them to actually do. Like that whole example you just gave and going from 30, and also giving us the nudge that we can't just say something, right? We can't, it's big to us. We know it's big to us. And sometimes I think when we get caught up is when we want to do things and we know how big it is and we think we just say it's big to someone else. It may be just as big to someone else, but to your point, you had to convey how big it is and for them to say, that's big to me.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that run through on that. How can we influence or just inspire current entrepreneurs doing different things? Some may not even be entrepreneurs. Some may just be doing a thing that they want to be big, to really understand what does that actually mean? How can you have impact? If you were to walk away with something to say, this is what I want to instill in you, or if it's a client, this is what we will walk through. What is that thing to bring you to that next level of really understanding branding and marketing and it becoming bigger than just, I have a business, but it can actually be influence and impact?
Have an idea, but have a strategy behind it. And any idea can seem too big, but once you have a strategy, that can help it grow at the end of the day. And if that's overwhelming, I have ADHD, so people say that you have to like break things down into digestible chunks. And for me, that's helpful in terms of helping me execute. So if it seems overwhelming, just map out all of the different components that you think might exist within that thing, and then use that to sort of help with your strategy. And then secondly, your network is important. And your network can help teach you what you don't know. Everything that exists, has some kind of framework, right? Before I had marketing experience, I didn't know what a brand strategy was. I didn't know how to put an idea on paper, but there's a framework to building out a brand. There's a framework to building out a business. Very important to understand what that framework is and then fill in the holes of what that framework is for your business or idea. And even if it doesn't work right away, at least you have something to start with. And I think that's incredibly important.
So if individuals have that, taking that advice you just gave, but they don't have all those other things you mentioned earlier in place, how successful do you see that being? So if you were to go A, B, C, D, or some things may even be simultaneous, what are some of those things you would say to do to be a successful, impactful brand? Not just by these matrix, I'm making some money here, I'm making some money. How do you be a successful, sustainable, impactful? If you look at A, B, C, D, or A, B, C, D.
I think a sustainable, impactful brand is a sustainable, impactful business, right? If your business fundamentals aren't strong, your brand will be big, but you might burn yourself out by doing too many things, right? There's plenty of people that you or I might know that, are big in, say, our music promoters or our party promoters, right? And they know that, all right, I have a party happening. This is my network. Cool. People show up to my party, and then that's how I make money. But is being a party promoter sustainable? I don't think so. There's a lot of people who do that, who transition into ownership, right? Let me take a couple steps back. There's a lot of people who start off as party promoters, and that's a side hustle in college, and that's that. There's a guy I know here in Boston who started off as a party promoter in college, and ended up pivoting that into owning his own restaurant. Now he owns a restaurant and obviously has nights each week that, cater and relate to his crowd. But just about every, Saturday during the basketball season, you can see a Celtics player, at his club, at his bar, at his restaurant, which at the end of the day turns into a lounge. So for him, he was able to take his understanding of party culture and use that to sort of create something that's lasting for him. He had to have a strategy behind that. And he didn't just throw parties and thought that was cool. There was a bigger vision that he had. And he was able to sort of pivot that into something that is outside of just something that's cool for people to sort of participate in. So think about something that you could do that owns, that I think is incredibly important. And I think that's important to say because, I'm an older millennial, but you have a lot of younger millennials and Gen Z who love to party, who love to go out, who love this. And, back in the 2000s, and I still go out every now and then too, but that was me back then as well. I didn't really care to sort of start my own thing, But you could very well, if that's part of your identity and part of what you do, you could very well create your own thing and make it sustainable. You just have to start it, and you have to have a strategy behind it, and you have to have a vision of where you see that in the long term. I think that's very important, is connecting your strategy, your vision, and connecting your vision, your long-term vision, to a strategy in the short term.
And that's no matter what you're doing, because I keep using the word, and I always use it. I use it when I say entrepreneurship, I use it to cover so many different areas, but it doesn't matter whatever you're doing. If it is something in which you're going to provide a product or service, it is something that you are going to communicate to the world as this brand source. Everything you're saying would apply to that. It doesn't matter what you're actually doing, right? So, because you brought up the music promoter, and I guess a question I have too, I want to make it a complex question, because I was going one way. But why would you say music promoter? So you say you don't think that's sustainable. Is it because, what if a music promoter have a strategy? I mean, yeah, I hear what your friend did, but say if someone decided, I'm not going to use this experience for that, but I want to do music promotion. Why do you see that as something that's possibly not?
Well, more so party promotion, right? Back in 2000s, the idea of a party promoter was a person who wasn't necessarily connected to a venue. They just brought in people to the venue, right?
Different venues, right?
Yeah, they brought in people to the venue, and they got a cut of either the door sales or they got a cut of the liquor sales, right? And you might walk away with like $1,000 that night, which is great. But if you're in your 20s and you're doing that and you're partying every weekend, 3 nights a week, bringing, on average a couple $1,000s a week, that's not sustainable, because you're drinking every night. That's not good for your health, number one. But secondly, like, that club or restaurant could close any day or could not like your clientele. And then after that, what do you have, right? So, like I said, he was able to pivot that sort of process to actually owning his own spot, and he was able to sort of create a
Absolutely.
brand out of that place. If you're ever in Boston, definitely check out Hugh Boston. It's a pretty cool place. So,
no, listen, I will definitely check it out. So I'll make sure I check it out. But those who replay can do it. But you just spoke my language, ownership. And I wanted to hear how that wasn't sustainable, which is constantly doing something for someone else that you really don't have teeth in, and it can change at any time on that. So thank you for clarifying that. I want to give you a case study. So say if you have someone who's an artist, or an independent artist, and they're building their brand, and they want sustainability, and they want something, a strategy. Like, if you had a client like that came to you, what would be some things you would think about if you had an independent artist out here as an entrepreneur? That is the business. They're the CEO of themselves.
Yeah. I mean, the CEO of themselves, they have their own story. I think their story outside of their music needs to be known. What inspires them and why they're creating their music, I think, also needs to be known. They need something that helps differentiate themselves from other artists, because at the end of the day, people relate to who you are as a storyteller. And if more and more people know what your story is, then there's going to be more people who are going to want to listen to your music and then show up to your shows, buy your collateral, whatever it is. If you think of Kanye West, regardless of where he's at now, back in the 2000s, he had me being a college student, he had us on a chokehold, because his music told a story. College dropout, awkward black guy who likes to wear polo. I was wearing polo back then. And he was able to tell a story that was different from sort of the gangster rap narrative at the time. He differentiated himself, and he was able to resonate with people who still listened to gangster music, but also told a story that was different, that people didn't necessarily see. And then separately, his music was good, right? Your craft has to be good. If it's not good, then it's going to be tough for it to sell, in my opinion. So good definitely is relative, because there's a lot of newer rappers that I don't listen to that have an audience. I'm not their audience, but those people know what good is. And if you know what your audience is and you know what they like, you want to keep consistently creating stuff that relates and resonates to them.
And they're doing those things like you said. So whether someone likes the music or not, they're doing those other things and delivering what those particular individuals may like to hear, but they're just not delivering something what someone likes to hear. There's actually, even though it looks simple, there's actually all these other integral parts that are going on that helps them to move. What type of clientele, individual, so not on a business level, but small businesses, individuals, event, whatever, what type of clientele do you work with?
Right now, I'm still expanding what my scope is. Within the past 2 years since I started doing my consultancy, the first client wasn't a choice. It was not necessarily wasn't a choice, but it was an opportunity. It was opportunistic, right? My wife works in energy, so it was a client that was doing stuff in the energy space. Not sexy, but paid well. And that was that. But the type of clients that I work with now, I want to say 2 years ago, have existed in the sports or health and wellness space. One was a brand that a contact that I'm connected with closely here in Boston. He started a run crew in Boston called Pioneers Run Crew, and then started his own apparel brand. And I helped him out with digital and social strategy for his business for, I want to say, briefly for 2 summers ago, and then more consistently last year. Helped him with his crowdfunding campaign, helped him raise $124,000, and sort of left when I started my full-time job where I'm currently at my employer. But now I have a part-time gig working for an indoor track and field facility here in Boston. And for me, very iconic place called the Reggie Lewis Center. I heard about them way back in the 90s when my brother used to run track. He ended up running high school nationals here at the Reggie Lewis Center. And now, fast forward, 30 years later, I'm helping them out with digital marketing strategies for their indoor track. So for me, definitely came full circle, and the network that I built allowed me to sort of land this role. And I'm able to sort of help them with their marketing strategies, help them with social media strategies, and hopefully it's a bigger long-term contract that I have with them. And then I'm sourcing other ones that exist within the health and wellness space, or the community impact space as well here in Boston, or other areas too. So that's sort of where I'm at right now. If I could sort of scale up the sports space, particularly in the running space, that's ideally where I'd want to be. But if it's things that touch community impact, that's also something that I'm passionate about. More so because that's stuff that I can actually partner with my wife on, because she's very deeply tied to the community that we live in. So,
well, I could tell you one thing when it comes to the sports space, running specific in particular, you're definitely needed. As I mentioned earlier, with just this transition from collegiate up, you're needed. I mean, with the transition with NIL and everything, people figuring out where to go, it was a very narrowed vision on this NIL space, which was possibility of making money. But it is now expanding, and people are catching on that it's more than making money. It is literally segueing and pushing you to ownership, and what all that means. And this is just a springboard to it. So you would definitely be needed in that space. So we need to be stay in contact. But where can individuals connect with you? Like, what's the best platforms for them to connect with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Look me up on Robert Ennis, or you can follow my Instagram, my Culture Tap Instagram. Hold on, let me look it up real quick. I don't know it by heart, but find me on Instagram, and I'll definitely give you a follow as well. My Culture Tap Instagram for my consultancy is culture_tap. So find me on Instagram or find me on LinkedIn, and I'd definitely love to connect.
Nice. Now, I'm done with the questions. Is there anything that I did not cover that you would like to share? And those who are listening, you were able to, I know you probably were captivated with everything he was saying. You were able to ask some things. I only can ask from my one view, but is there anything that I did not ask of you that you think is an important thing to leave with the listeners to know?
Yeah, I think always important to find out your why. Like, your why should fuel you wherever it is and wherever you go. I think the through line of everything that I did in my career sort of touches on to me wanting to have an impact in the sports space. I pivoted away, working at Nestle and Kraft Heinz with a purpose of understanding the fundamentals, to then jump back into sort of making an impact in the space that I'm currently in. So for me, my why has always had some kind of strategy, and I've always done a good job of sort of connecting the dots back to my purpose. So your why is incredibly important. If you're doing it because it's cool, that's definitely going to fall flat. You have to connect your why into everything that you do.
Thank you. That is huge. So tonight's conversation, everyone, it definitely reminded us that branding isn't like just this performance thing. Like, it is presence. And there's so many different things that Robert talked about that creates, that develops, and that nurtures that presence. I know there's a lot of conversations even going on now. think Tabitha Brown, people are upset at her when she said, if you're in entrepreneurship, get a job. There was nothing wrong with what she was saying at all, but that's neither here or there. What I brought that up to say is we all jump into entrepreneurship, and I'm using that word broadly, but we jump into what we want to offer as a product or service and our passion. But there's a lot that goes to it that makes all that other stuff look very simple. And Robert touched on a lot about that. For us to, build something that lasts beyond just trends, beyond a title, beyond the surface, but that actually is impactful and influential, sustainable, and see something, build from it. These are some of the things. So I say this is one of the important segments to go back and listen again. I also highly encourage connect with Robert, connect. And if there's any way that you can find for you all to collaborate or him to assist you in that, go for it. So whether you're shaping a business, a message, a movement, you heard his example of that run, right? That's not a specific business, but that was something, that was a movement, that was an event. And he applied all his tactics to that. And look what happened from 30 to over 300. Like that's crazy. So, but your brand is proof of what you believe. And if you really believe in it, then you're going to do the things to elevate it. And what I started with, your ability to pivot, adapt, and still lead with intention while you're doing that, that's what creates real impact. So thank you. And if you got something from watching this today, which I know you absolutely did, even if you're not watching it today, if you're watching it on the replay, if you're listening to it on the podcast, reflect on it, but share. I always say, the more you know, the more you grow, the more you learn. Definitely in this situation, the more you can earn. But the more you share, the more you show care. So don't keep this segment that we talked about with Robert to yourself. Make sure that you share this knowledge, spread the wisdom, tag a friend. And again, I'm going to repeat, connect. I'm going to put, Trinisha had posted on here, Robert, a lot of good food for thought. Got her mind going. And I'm sure those are listening too. I can tell, I could feel the energy of those just sitting, listening, like, because we need this, Robert. We need you. We need this information because we're out there just going. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to figure out, why isn't it landing? Yeah. And why isn't it impactful? This is why. Someone who's been in it, working for businesses, but doing it even for himself. Mm-hmm. So until next time, keep striving, keep growing, and most importantly, keep seeking elevation. And Robert, to your lovely wife and your soon-to-be seed that's going to be here on this earth and going to take your business, the office, which means he already going to be born into that. He going to be born into that energy to do some great things. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your knowledge. And I'm that segment, that part I told you is going to be a highlight. So thank you.
Thank you for the platform. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to rewatching this as well. So.
Yay. And I look forward to us talking more too.
For sure. For sure.
All right. Peace and pop progress.